In November 1316, the fate of the entire French nation came down to a bitter standoff between a ruthless political mastermind and a 0-day-old infant. For 300 years, the Capetian dynasty executed a political miracle. From the year 987 onward, the French crown passed perfectly from father to son, generation after generation, creating a streak of absolute unbroken stability. That massive chain of momentum snapped over a game of real tennis. In June 1316, King Louis X finished an intense match, drank a large quantity of cooled wine, fell deeply ill, and died. He left behind a paralyzed government. His only living child was a daughter whose paternity was heavily questioned, thanks to a highly public royal adultery scandal, and his wife, Queen Clementia, was heavily pregnant. Seeing the opening, the dead king's younger brother, Philip of Poitiers, raced to Paris. He locked down the royal palace, seized the regency, and settled in to wait and see if the queen's unborn child would be a male heir. 3 centuries of royal succession came crashing to a halt. The fate of Europe's most powerful kingdom now hinged entirely on a biological coin flip. On November 15th, the waiting ended. The queen gave birth to a boy. He was named John I, and from the exact second he took his first breath, he was the undisputed king of France. France suddenly found itself operating under a strange dual sovereignty. By law, the tiny infant was the absolute ruler of the realm, but in practice, his uncle Philip commanded the army, controlled the royal treasury, and dictated the physical reality of the state. 5 days after he was born, King John I died. Medical historians today point to the high infant mortality rates of the 14th century to explain the death, but to the medieval court, the timing was incredibly convenient for Philip. Vicious rumors spread instantly across the kingdom. The most persistent whisper claimed that Mahat of Artois, a powerful noblewoman fiercely loyal to Philip, had assassinated the baby king by driving a poisoned pin straight into his skull. True or not, the sudden death broke a powerful spell. The Capetian bloodline no longer looked divinely protected, and the French throne was now exposed as a vulnerable prize that could be violently contested. Philip completely ignored the traditional mourning period. He marched straight to Reims, gathered his remaining allies, and had himself officially crowned King Philip V. He still faced a legal hurdle. His older brother's daughter, Joan, was technically next in line to rule. Philip needed a permanent justification to skip over his niece and validate his own seizure of power. He convened an assembly of nobles and scholars to dig through archives, successfully resurrecting a forgotten ancient set of Frankish rules known as the Salic Law. This document was interpreted to establish a strict rule. Women were permanently excluded from inheriting the throne. Philip secured his crown, but by engineering this loophole, he proved that the rules of royal succession could be rewritten on the fly by whoever held the most political leverage. The hasty legal maneuvering left a deep mark on the nation. Almost immediately, a legend took root. People whispered that the real baby king hadn't died at all, but had been swapped with a commoner's child to protect him from assassins. Nearly 40 years later, that myth took human form. An Italian merchant named Giannino Baglioni suddenly stepped onto the world stage, claiming that he was the surviving John I, the rightful king of France. Baglioni was the pawn of a rogue Roman politician named Cola di Rienzo. Rienzo fabricated the backstory, provided forged documents, and convinced the merchant of his royal bloodline to create an international distraction for his Italian goals. Incredibly, the scam worked. Baglioni traveled across Europe and secured formal diplomatic recognition from the King of Hungary, who treated the merchant as the true French monarch. Because Philip V had so blatantly manufactured his own legitimacy decades earlier, European leaders were willing to entertain a forged backstory if it suited their diplomatic aims. The law had become a tool for convenience, and the identity of the king followed suit. Baglioni's attempts to claim the throne ended in a Neapolitan cell, where he died in 1363, insisting on his royal identity. But back in Paris, Philip's legal maneuvering was about to backfire. By 1328, Philip and his brothers had all died without leaving any male heirs. The direct Capetian line vanished, handing the crown to the Valois dynasty. Across the Channel, King Edward III of England saw his opening. Using his mother's Capetian ancestry, he demanded the French throne for himself. France refused, citing the very Salic law Philip had used to block women. In response, Edward invaded, ravaging the French countryside and beginning a conflict that would last over a century. An improvised legal code, drafted to plug a 5-day power vacuum, ultimately fed the nation into the relentless carnage of the 100 Years' War. Historians view the 1316 crisis as a pivotal moment for the French crown, extending beyond the immediate drama of poisons and pretenders. The 1316 succession proved the French crown was becoming a legal institution, not just a family possession. John I showed the title king could detach from the ability to rule, while Philip V proved power could be held through legal precedent alone. The life of John the Posthumous lasted only 5 days, but it established a distinction between the king's body and the king's office. It transformed the throne from a biological inheritance into a framework of law that would eventually define the structure of the nation itself.